We're good?
If there's at any point you say something that you don't want on the record or whatever, just let me know and I'll go and I'll delete it whenever I get it on the computer.
Okay, so we're ready to push the button now.
No, it's good.
It's already gone. We're interviewing tonight Miss Betty Mabin.
Wallace.
Oh, I'm sorry. We were just talking about Betty Mabin. Betty Wallace, I'm sorry.
You're forgiven.
And we're just going to have you tell us about yourself, your family, your life here in town, and we have a list of questions that we'll go down through, and if you want to elaborate on anything, please feel free. But I think to start out, tell us about you.
Oh, me?
About how old you are.
Oh, I'm 93.
You're 93.
And I was born right here in this house. And I graduated from high school here. And then I went to college. And by the way, there's one thing I'd like to say right now. Was I prepared for college? Yes, I was prepared for college. Everything except one thing. I hadn't had gym. And so I went to gym at class and we played volleyball. I was fine. I knew how to play volleyball. They decided all of a sudden that we were going to play basketball, and the only thing I'd seen were boys' rules. So I got into the game, and I had a guard, and I got the ball, and away we went down the road. And all of a sudden I was clear down beyond the middle of the court, and the whistle rang, and she yelled at me. She said, "What are you doing down there?" I said, "Well, I'm heading for that basket." And she said, "No. We don't do that. Girls' rules, where did you go to school? Girls' rules are up the other way." Well, I said, "Well, I went to New Florence High School, and we didn't have gym." Well, I thought she'd hit the ceiling. So that's the only time that I wasn't prepared for New Florence High School.
Wow.
Right.
Where did you go to college at?
I went to State Teachers College in Indiana.
In Indiana.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
And you.
Let's see. Oh, then I had I taught home economics in Beaver Falls High School, at middle school and high school for 40 years.
Wow. You retired.
I retired, and here I am.
So that's where you went, was to Beaver Falls. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Anything? Tell us about your family, your mother, your father, brothers and sisters.
Okay. My mother and father were both teachers, and they taught over in West Wheatfield Township. Okay. And they were both born up on Milliken Hill, down Crawford Road. Okay. My father was down Crawford Road. My mother was born off of Milliken Hill, and that Milliken Hill was that's the new Milliken Hill now. The other one was in fact, that church that's located there. It's almost sitting on the old Milliken Hill.
Yeah.
Yes. And then we had, I was the oldest child. And then I have a sister Lois, and she was married and she went to Indiana too, and she was married and had 2 sons, and they're both in Oregon right now. And she passed away about 8 years ago. And her husband is in Oregon with their sons. And I have a brother in Harrisburg, and I have a sister in Navarre, Ohio.
And she's still still with us?
Yes, my brother's retired, and my younger sister's retired too. They're all retired.
Okay.
So that was Lois and Paul, and who was the other? The other?
Joanna.
Joanna.
Okay.
I don't have her.
Oh, you don't have her. She's the baby.
Now you said that your mother and father were both teachers.
Taught over in West Wheatfield Township.
Okay.
Oh, and an interesting thing about my mother, the day she got her diamond, why the president of the school board appeared and said, "When are you being married?" And she said, "Not till next June." And she said, "What does that mean?" He says, "Well, you can still teach this next year."
Right, because you couldn't be married and teach.
She could not teach.
Yeah.
That blows my mind. My 3 aunts all were single.
Sure, all had that experience.
Sure.
Right.
Okay, so you left here right after college and
Right.
got your job. Okay. Here in town, when you were a young girl, before like you went to college, you were in high school. What? I don't want to say hang out, meet with a bad term, but what did you do for social activities?
Social activities. We spent lots of time at the Daring Oak,
Okay.
and then our churches were very active. We had a youth group in our church. The Methodist Church had one too, and I think both the Lutheran and the Brethren did.
And you were Presbyterian at the
I was United
old,
Presbyterian.
at the old, or
I was United Presbyterian down here.
okay, and
Yes.
then the Presbyterian
And,
joint.
yes, and we did loads of things together. We went up to Clark's Shade and had wiener roasts, and we went ice skating down 9th Street
On the
here,
brick pond.
down to the brick pond.
Yeah.
Those were things we did. We'd build a fire down there and skate for a while. And and then we just had this religious groups together. And when we were at the Dairy Oak, we just visited with each other and would dance a few dances and then come home.
What about the town hall?
Town hall,
Did
the town hall by that time was
pretty sad shape.
yes,
Yeah,
it had already
they had good intentions. But
yes,
it was,
but that was just tragic.
Yeah,
Yes, that was one reason that we didn't have any gym.
right.
Now they did have it. That when I was let's see, in the grades, they had basketball there, but all of a sudden as far as the diameter of the room was not correct, and so then that eliminated. We couldn't have basketball at all. Thus
Now, do you remember when the old school burned down?
Oh, sure. I was a junior in high school.
Okay, that was
And in my senior year, I spent half in the in the Red School building and half in the town hall.
yeah, they had classes. Yeah.
And then going back to the town hall, then all of a sudden they took and put permanent seating in. So that eliminated, we couldn't even have gym classes in there.
So it was more of a theater then.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Well, it belonged to the town.
Yeah, right.
Now the fire company was there, and the council was there, and so you see that they had to make room for them, so they kind of squeezed the school out, and it was too bad.
Okay. So did you belong to any like clubs or anything here in town other than like the youth group? Was there Girl Scouts?
American Legion had
American
a club
Legion.
for us.
Okay. All
We
right.
had for a youth group. Yes.
Okay. And that was where was
and the
Legion
American
Hall?
Legion Hall was up on the Queen Hotel,
Right.
and the last area in the back.
Okay.
The furthest one this way.
Right. And I remember from being a kid that was the first library.
Oh
in
yes,
town.
that was the first library.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yes.
Okay. When you were growing up, because obviously, everybody didn't have a car. How did you get around? If you wanted to go to Johnstown,
Rode the train.
okay,
Oh yes.
and you remember the
Oh,
train
sure.
station,
Oh
and
yes. Oh my. That's
could you elaborate a little bit?
Oh my goodness.
I'm not
yes.
trying to take you off
Oh
your
no,
tour,
I know, but if you want, I
Yeah.
can tell you about the train right
Yeah.
now. Just go down here to the end of Chestnut Street, and you could go. There was a road right up onto the tracks, and there was a waiting room right there, and it had a little pot-bellied stove in it. And in the wintertime it was warm, and in the summertime it was cold, and and then over from it would have been on the this side of the tracks. They had a freight station, and that's where you went in and bought your tickets, and that's where the train came in and opened the doors. The car would open the doors, and they would put freight out there. And then also that's where there was a hook up there where they put the mail from the car,
Right.
and that's how the mail got here.
If you were going to Johnstown to shop for the day because they had more trains running.
Oh sure.
What did a ticket cost you to get to Johnstown?
I haven't the slightest idea, but evidently wasn't much.
Yeah.
Because we leave early. What was it? I've forgotten the name of it. It's a train. They had names. The trains had
Okay.
names. One left about 10 o'clock in the morning. That's when we'd go on. Then we'd come back on the one at 6 o'clock.
Okay. Neat.
And you'd walk to Penn Traffic, and you'd walk over to Glosser's, and then you'd walk over to where the 5 and Main Street,
Yeah.
over to the 5 and 10. Spend the whole day. You'd have lunch. So
Lunch at
just-
the TikTok, huh?
uh-huh,
Yeah.
Spend the whole day there.
Yeah.
Come
Now-
back with all your baggage.
Now, did they have any bus service here then?
No, not until
No.
after the Second World War.
So if you worked maybe in the mill, you know, you had to ride the train probably to go
Oh yes,
to
there was the
Johnstown.
train service there.
Or if you were going to Bolivar or Latrobe, or
Or some of them would. Oh yes.
you rode
right.
the train. Wow.
Oh sure. Well, in the summertime, my father worked at Glosser's, and he rode the train all the time. Or no, there was early trains. It would be 6 o'clock.
But
7
probably
o'clock.
then it was easier if you had a car. That was for getting around here and going on.
Oh sure. Right.
But it was easier to ride.
Oh
the
yes.
public.
I never remember that we didn't have a car.
Right.
We always had a car.
But it wasn't like people use cars now. You just
Oh,
jump
no,
in, cruise
no.
around, go for a
Oh,
ride,
sure,
right?
right.
Yeah. Okay.
The first one we had was an Erskine.
Erston.
At the type of Studebaker.
Oh, okay.
And talking about George McDowell up there, and let's see, that would be about 15th Street.
Yep. Where the hardware.
Ligonier and 15th Street's
Yep.
where he had his business. And that showroom he had there, he sold Studebakers. And he and a man, Mr. Hurl down here, would go to Detroit and bring those cars back. They'd go out by
And that
train
was
and
where
bring them.
Cavanaugh's Hardware, and then
Yes,
later. Yeah,
right.
Okay.
And he was also a plumber.
Yes.
And he did a lot of the plumbing the people that lived, that I was going to talk about down here at 10th Street, Kirshner was their name. They were carpenters, and then they
John.
had a son who was an electrician. And the McDowell, now they had a setup, and they did many of those homes that are out there at Ross Mountain Park, those older homes that are up along that ledge. They built those.
Okay. Tell me something that, I mean, you've already told me a lot that I didn't really realize or think about, but is there something that you know or that you remember that I might not know? I mean, I've been here all my life. Is there just some little, I don't know if it's a deep dark secret or just something funny or something that you would share with?
Could you wait till I go through this?
Okay, absolutely we can. Absolutely, we can come back
Maybe
to
I
that.
can.
Because I have-
Then you'd be able to.
I have one other thing. You know, who were? I mean, we were talking a little bit before we started about some of the characters that I remember. Is there anybody that you remember from your younger days that you'd
Oh,
like to
yes.
mention? Just somebody who entertained you or somebody
Helen
who.
Mabin.
Okay.
Okay, and let's see what, and her friend was. Oh shucks. I can see her put a name to her. Rager.
Einie?
No, not Heidi.
Oh, what, Ruby?
Ruby Rager.
Ruby?
That's it.
Okay,
yeah,
that would
okay.
be Albert's sister.
That's
Jock's
Jock's
sister.
sure, okay.
All right.
Well, there was, and then down below here was the Hurl Mansion, this white house that's down here.
Mary and
And yes,
Ann
and by the
Ann.
way, they made their money on lumber.
Yeah.
Well, all this area had been building, and
Yeah.
they would buy the land and lumber, then sell the land, or they'd take just the lumber from the land.
Right.
And they were in with the Kirshners too.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, one of they raised a kind of an elite family, and one of their daughters was being married, and she was being married up here in this Hurl's
In the
house.
big house. Yeah.
And she was marrying somebody associated with sanitary dairy. I don't know what or not, but anyway, Helen decided that we should go to the wedding. And of course, you look at that red brick house down there where Hendersons live. There's the side is up and down. It's kind of graduated. Okay. So what she and Ruby did, that, well, it was Helen that charged us. She charged us 10 cents. We could go down there and sit and watch it go to the wedding because we could see in the windows.
You paid admission to go to a wedding.
So we went to the wedding and got down there, and we watched her. But oh my goodness sakes, what happened was they weren't conscious of it anyway because she got dressed upstairs and we saw her getting dressed. And then we saw her coming down the stairs. Then we saw her turning this corner and we saw them proceeding in the living room.
So you sat at Henderson, at Lee
on
Henderson's
the
house
grass.
and watched
We
the
sat
wedding
on
at
the- we
Horrell
sat on the
across the
grass.
street. There was a
Yes.
barricade. Okay.
Yeah, we just whole line of kids up there
That's
sitting going to the
hilarious.
wedding.
That's hilarious.
Great.
That is. That is, and that's something that I would have never.
Well, that happened before your time.
Well, before the only Horrell I really ever hear about is Snooks. My dad used to talk about Snooks,
Oh yes.
and he would be a character.
Yes, right.
Yes. You Doug, do you have?
No, I'm good. I'll jump in
Okay.
whenever.
Because the only other thing that I really have on here, because I know you have some things, I think you have some pictures or some information to share later on. But tell us about your walking tour that you said you were just going to kind of go through. Town.
The whole thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to start right over here at 10th Street.
Okay.
And that house that's there wasn't there at all. There was the Kirschners up here had a building where they stored their lumber there. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, there was a blacksmith shop there. And it was run by a family of Moors. And see, these Moors around here are their descendants.
Okay.
And we, as kids, we'd go over there and watch them put the shoes on the horses. And they'd bring the horses in. They'd be pulling wagons or buggies, and they'd park them all around there. And they allowed us to go in there. Now, we weren't to go any further, but it was interesting to watch them take and peel that almost like a toenail off the horse, and then put that on hot, and that horse never moved. And then put those nails in, and then they just could keep on going. It was just interesting doing that. Now, there was a second one, and that was up at the corner of Ligonier Street and 10th Street up here, that vacant lot that's up there now. All right, now that was the very same thing, a blacksmith shop, and that was Igo's. Yes, right. Then going on down this road, down 10th Street, and built right along the railroad. In fact, the sand and things, they just bring the railroad cars right in there and flip them over and put that sand there. Now that was Kinsey's, and they also put those little shales, that shell business. Then they had lumber, and they had an office down there. And then in addition to that, there was and by the way, the Kinseys lived in this house over here. In fact, there's a granddaughter over here right now still living there. In addition to that, the Duncans had a feed mill down there. And when people brought their grain in from the farms, they had a scales that was built into the ground over there. They're like a little hut where that was red, and then they got on this wooden thing. And it's just interesting to see that, right? And then they had a daughter, Jean Duncan, who was she was their only child. And she was very active in school and the band and things of that nature. Something happened, she passed away. It was just such a tragic experience. Now the wife was a substitute teacher, and she was a graduate of a college in Ohio. I've forgotten which one it was. But that's down in that area. Then I'd take you up onto the railroad track. I think I've done part of that for you. But if you go on up the railroad track up to where, well, it's opposite where the road comes out of. Where's that mine up there? What's the name of that town?
Pitchcut.
No, not up that far. Just out of New Florence up here.
By the VFW?
Oh, shucks.
Are you out of town yet, or
Yeah, you're just out of town. It's on the right.
like where the dollar Or on the right is?
Beyond the dollar store.
Past Boswell Road.
Boswell Road, that's what I
Okay,
was trying
yeah,
to think
okay.
of, yes. Okay. Now, just beyond Boswell Road there, if you watch on the railroad, there's a huge area where water comes down from that stream from Boswell. Now, I don't remember the name of that
Baldwin.
stream. Baldwin Stream.
It's
Okay,
Baldwin.
Baldwin, okay, I've forgotten about that. Okay, well, that water came down through there, and that's where the trains actually received their water. They would stop there up in that area. And you'd hear them, and then you knew when they were going because they whistled. And it's no wonder we had a lot of train station because there was all kinds of coal around here. And that railroad track coming down there from Boswell, there was a mine up there. And that's brought that coal down, and it got onto that railroad.
And they
right there.
brought timber down on that
Yes,
too.
oh
I think.
sure,
Yeah.
too. And then on down here in down in Climax, that was a prosperous little area down there. And my mother taught school down there. And let's see, the other one you may have gone to school to her was let's see,
Grace?
Mrs. Riddell. She was a Hole. Mrs. Riddell, remember that?
I know Grace Jones, I think, taught. maybe
Yes,
down there
but
too, yeah.
Mrs. Riddell would be down in the. She was in the grades.
No, I don't-
Well, anyway, she and her parents were the big wigs down there with that mine down there, and my mother had the upper grades and she had the lower grades. And they taught down there, and you can see why this railroad went through. And in addition to being a beautiful valley, they didn't have
Lots
to
of
do much as
stuff,
far as
yeah.
the moving the earth was concerned. But anyway, so while we're up there at the other end,
Okay.
why, right across from that was an area that was called Clark Shade. Now, you'd never know it was Clark Shade today because all that was cleared off, and that's where we had a lot of our church parties, and we had hot dogs. We always had winter roast up in there, and there were loads of, the church would have picnics, and they would be up there.
I remember the red building.
Yes, and there was a house there, and people lived there, but I think by the name of Bennett. I think that was their name.
Well, Webb's lived across the street.
Yes,
Dorothy Webb. I remember
And
her.
then, and also we went swimming in that Baldwin.
Pretty cold.
Cold. Oh my goodness sake.
Still is.
Sure.
I was in it not too long ago.
But that's where we would swim up in that area. Okay, now that's up the railroad.
Okay.
Anything else with that? Okay, let's come down now and finish 10th Street. Up on the going up the right side, the first building there would have been the water company, and that goes clear back to and New Florence actually owned that company, and it owned it up until very recently. And I understand the only reason they sold it was that there were so many complications and regulations that they just weren't able to cope with them. But anyway, that's one place where my family helped quite a bit in New Florence. They bought stock whenever they were getting that together. And so my great-grandfather and my great-uncle bought stock in that. And it's listed, your dad has it listed in my book. In fact, when he was writing the book, he said to me, "Betty, where'd they get the money?" I said, "I haven't the slightest idea." I said, "Well, of course, they had owned this house, and they also owned another one down, let's say, across from, Ruth Hoover. They owned that house across from Ruth Hoover,
Where Carm Craft lived, maybe now?
let's see. Yes, that's where it is.
Yeah.
It's the one that's in the corner
Yeah.
there, right across
Okay.
it from the main part. Well, so they were interested. They rented them, and that's how they earned money. So water was good because then you could start. Up until that time, all they had was outside John's, and then all of a sudden you could bring water in your house, and it was just wonderful. So no wonder it was very important.
Around what year was that they brought water to you?
I don't know. That was before my time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I was gonna say my aunts had an outhouse for the longest time, and then when they did put the plumbing in the house, they just put the bathroom in the middle of a bedroom. So when you went to the bedroom, you had to shut two different doors, and if somebody needed into the other bedroom, they just had to wait.
Well, see, that's what they did here. They took in and made one small bedroom, and then the bathroom's at the head of the stairs, and then there's another bedroom door into this bedroom
Yeah.
at the back. Yes, sure.
And it all worked.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. No
You
problem.
didn't have any choice, huh?
No, I should, but it was a long time when many people wasn't able to afford it.
Right.
I know that people live next door here. They used that out. They were using that outside toilet, and I was still around, so it wasn't anything that
Yeah.
but it was very, very important to us. And let's see. Then going on up, the railroad had a beautiful home in the corner there. That they had some of their important people had lived in it. And when I was growing up, the Stormers lived in it.
Okay. Yeah.
And then if you go across the street, across Ligonier Street, then you came to Wagner's garage, and they did repair work there. They also had, they would have display Ford cars. They sold Ford cars there. So there'd be a nice looking Ford in that glass window. Or in that glass, the room with the glass window. And then on up, there wasn't too much other than just people living. Now, if you come down on the other side of town, then you come down, you came then to their gasoline station. And it had been at one time a livery stable. And that's something, you just can't remember. It's just think, I can remember my mother telling about people coming to visit them. And they would go up here and get a horse and buggy and come out on West Wheatfield Township.
Yeah.
Imagine.
Yeah.
And then, of course, also there when we're talking where they have the Wagner's garage, where they have the display. Now beyond that was a hotel. And so there were actually people that would come and stay there.
Down, going down.
This is that vacant lot beyond just beyond Wagner's garage was a hotel.
Okay.
I can remember when that one came down.
Yeah, before me.
People, it was red brick, and people lived in there. I can remember them living in there, like apartments first.
Wow.
So, and it faced out right on Ligonier Street. There's that vacant lot there. And then another interesting part, going over to their gasoline station, there was a man there that worked there for years, and Jess Gable was his name, and he was a mute.
Oh.
And he couldn't say a word, but he recognized, and he was the nicest man. He was a local boy from here, and to think that Wagner's employed him and kept him there. And he could operate those gasoline tanks just for you. It wasn't self-service.
Right.
He did the serving then.
Isn't it funny? We wonder why. We wonder about why people don't give people like that a chance nowadays. And
Yes, you do.
we did it already.
We do everything for them, and they're just, and it's too bad. And then going on down on 10th Street, there's nothing. Then we'll come back over here to the Catholic Church, okay, on 9th Street. And as far as the Catholic Church was concerned, by the way, if you need an extra brick, there are 2 on my front porch out there.
Oh, okay. I gathered a couple
I
up.
have 6. They brought me 6.
Wow.
And so I'm willing to share 2. But let's see what I had under the Catholic Church then. Is it let's see where we are.
Now, were you here during the '36 flood?
Oh yes, I was here during the 36
Now,
flood.
and they talk about there were tombstones. There were more tombstones over there before
Oh
the
yes.
36
Oh
flood.
my God. That whole lot was filled with tombstones.
Right.
But I tell you, they didn't remove those until they started to mow the lawn with the electric lawn, with the gasoline lawnmower.
Oh, okay. So they didn't
See,
really
some of them had fallen over. They
Okay.
weren't. Some of them were all over the place. But
Okay.
they were there until they started using the gasoline lawnmower. Then they took and moved them all down to the end of the lot.
Okay.
Okay. Then when they built the
Church hall.
church affair down there, they hauled them all away.
They all disappeared. Yeah, I've heard different stories, and I won't say it on tape about where they went.
No.
But yeah, there was always a big thing, when we were kids about, and my dad always said, because he went to the church, about
Oh sure.
they don't really know where the graves are, and
No.
there's just very few more people
Well,
that could actually be buried.
yes. Well, they claim it's filled.
Well, I think Rosemary Sahoski, Ani
Rager.
Rager will be the last one, I think.
Yes.
I think. I don't know. Okay, I'm sorry I took you off your.
Oh no, no.
But I just had to ask you that because I don't. You know, there aren't many people who have really sharp minds to remember the 36 flat.
Oh, sure. Well,
Yeah.
I'll tell you what happened. My father was there was somebody a family member died over there, and my father had taken school off, and my mother and Virginia Ewings that lived up here in the Pershing House, it's
Okay.
called. Why they had gone to the funeral. Whenever they came down, why they couldn't get the car across the bridge, so my fathers and Virginia stayed there with the car, and my mother got in Cunningham. What was his name? Audrey's dad.
Not Gerald.
Not Gerald.
Gerald was his son.
Well, anyway, Audrey's father came along with a milk truck, and my mother got in that milk truck and rode across that bridge to get home because my brother was a baby at that time. And my dad and Virginia Ewings started down that railroad, and they walked the railroad, came down to the intersection, and came up and got off up here and came home. That's how they got home. So that's the reason I know that
Yeah.
about the 36 flat.
Well, and this it happened St. Patrick's Day, right?
Yes, St.
Yep.
Patrick's
Okay.
Day.
1936.
1936.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was here for the 77 too.
I was too. Yeah. Yeah.
When did you come back to town?
Well, let's see. I was here many times in the summertime if I didn't go to school, and then I was home here on weekends. See, my father passed away when he was in, let's see, about 55, and so my sister was in college, and my brother was still in high school, and my other sister was still in a grade, so I kind of had help out.
Nice.
And so that's the reason I came home quite a bit. But I did my job at Beaver Falls. I didn't need to worry. Yeah. Let's see. No, where were we?
We were at the cemetery.
We're over there at the
Church.
cemetery. And let's see what I was going to see. Anything else that I wanted to tell you about it? Where are we?
I'm impressed that you write so small and still can read it.
Oh,
I'm only 50 and I have a hard time. Because I write very small, but then I can't read it half the time anymore.
I write very big and sloppy. So.
let's see. No, 13th isn't back to. Okay, back here I am. I found it. Oh, another an interesting thing about the church did not have any central heating when it was first built over there.
Did not.
It had a coal stove, and a man by the name of Warder came every Saturday and started the fire. They also had to have water, and so in the wintertime, he brought a beautiful cut glass pitcher, just a beautiful pitcher, over here to my mother, and she gave him water, and that's what
really?
they used. So it was Protestant water they were using.
Oh boy! Well,
We always got a kick out of that.
That's fantastic.
that is, and that's
Yes.
and that's that. Regardless of your religious orientation, that's funny.
Yeah, it is absolutely
right. Right.
Yes, it is fun. Now, one thing I will say that one of the things that I think that we don't do enough with is Memorial Day. I mean, now that
Used to be big here.
yes, the VFW does it, but it's not enough as far as the community,
Right.
because the churches took part. Well, now, of course, they don't have any kids now, so maybe they wouldn't be able to. But we always ended up over here at the Catholic
bridge,
Church, and the American Legion had a service, and they had a speaker, and it was just a nice community affair, and that was nice for
And
the
a big parade because
Oh,
the band and
sure.
yeah,
Oh, yes.
I marched in a few of those with the Boy
I
Scouts.
remember.
Yes,
and
and that's one
I
thing
remember
that's right.
every single one of them while I was alive. My grandmother was a Gold Star mother from the two boys dying.
All right.
Red Woodell always would dress up in his Navy
Oh,
uniform.
sure.
Still until his.
And Bill O'Shell.
Oh,
Oh, that's right.
Billy
That's right.
O'Shell.
Yep.
Oh, sure, right.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's go on down the road. And I did mention the Hurls and their part in the community.
Right.
And then
They had the bank as well, right?
Pardon?
They owned part of the bank.
They were part of the bank,
Right.
yes. Well, there was a whole board on the bank.
Right.
The Kirshner, not Kirshners, the Trimmels were on there too.
Because
They
I
were
think
very-
Mary
and
ran
then, yes,
back.
and then I understood that my grandfather was on, but he evidently he didn't stay because he isn't listed anyplace there. But I don't.
Okay.
I'm not too interested
right.
about that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
Just wanted to get-
No, but it's interesting. And then we get down to the United Presbyterian Church down there, and there was a family of Hysongs lived across there,
Yep.
and then there was a family of Sinclairs lived on up the street, and this, of course, was the time that in here Mr. Sinclair had passed away. And my goodness, what those Hysongs did for that family. Clothes, food, you know, it was just very interesting. And then, of course, the United Presbyterian Church, it originated in Huff. And also the Presbyterian Church originated in Huff. There were two buildings over there. And
Read about that.
and the school building was in between, I think. The Huff had a school building, or rather it was Centerville then. Yes, and the way you spelled Centerville was interesting too. The R and the E are in reverse. And then let's see. Then of course, and then of course Harvey McClung was a member of that church who was killed at Pearl Harbor, and then we had a wonderful tennis court down there too. And then of course they moved in the two churches, and that took away our tennis court. And then, of course, the two churches went together. And by the way, the United Presbyterian Church was supposed to be somebody they pushed out of the Presbyterian Church, is what the origin was. And then, of course, the two churches in Fairfield. And it's interesting to me how active Fairfield was, too. Yeah. They were, before, they go clear before New Florence
Right.
existence.
Right.
And then, of course, we formed together. We actually moved the Presbyterian Church down the street. And,
I have film of that.
Right, and put the two churches together. And then, let's see, and then, of course, another part of them coming to the school, we talked a little bit about the town hall. And now, after it was in 1941 that the school burned, I think, and that burned at Christmas time. And the red brick building had always been just for elementary, and then the beige brick building was for senior high, and they were always going to build an auditorium, but they never did. And then, of course, the fire came along, and I can remember standing and watching the fire, and when it hit the chemistry lab, how the different chemicals blew, and shooting. It was just interesting to watch it. Now, that was at Christmas time, and so then when we went back, these high school went early in the morning. I think it was about 7 o'clock, and I think we went till after lunchtime, and then from lunchtime, and then from that time on until I think about 5 o'clock, then the grade school came, and we had classes over in the town hall, that big room in the back. That's where we had the chemistry lab. That's where we had the home ec lab. That's where they had the shops. And of course, we were just getting started in vocational work here at that time, and that's how things were. And interesting thing about all the years that I can remember, we had graduation at the Methodist Church.
Baccalaureate.
And baccalaureate also.
What was your school mascot?
I don't even know that we had one. I don't remember.
Was it the Wolverines?
Oh yes, that's right.
And your colors were?
Our colors were blue and gold.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And but to think that and when I went to college, I was shocked to think that some of the kids that came from wonderful schools, they had problems, and it just different. It was just, thank goodness it was a good experience. Well, my sister the same way. My brother, they didn't have any problems, so it was worked out okay. Let's see if there's anything else.
Now, were you ever in Queens Hotel before it was the Bank and Trust or the
No.
New Florence Bank and
No,
Trust.
that's all.
And they had torn the top. It used to be like a four-story
Oh,
building.
yes.
Because I often wondered, because I remember when they tore that building down to build the new bank, when they hit it with the wrecking bar, it was like this cobalt blue, and then the wall had this kind of old-fashioned wall. Like it looked like it was a very grand
Hotel.
at one time. But I just remembered it with the sloped roof and the okay.
Yes. Okay, now let's go beyond the railroad, and we'll take up, let's see, it's 12th Street. There wasn't too much on 12th Street, and the upper part of 12th Street, where the bank is. Now, that would be on the left side going up. On the right side, that was practically a whole railroad development down in there.
Kings
I can
Row.
still remember when there were row houses down there, and there were all and they were on both sides. And then, of course, the two houses are up there on Ligonier Street right now. They were railroad houses too, and they were there then too. And then going from on Ligonier Street up to 13th Street, we had first, it was Hurl's Restaurant when I was there, and I remember when Mother went away, we could go up there for lunch. We were in school. And then next was a doorway. It went upstairs, and there was a dentist up there. Matt Hurl had a dentist office up there. And then on the other side, beyond that, was then T.D. Love's store. And they had and then, of course, the Utes took over after T.D. Love. And then we had the funny little post office box there. And then we had Trimble's. And one thing about that time in New Florence, you could find everything you needed. You didn't have to worry about going to Ideal Market. And that's one thing that was different. And then going up 13th Street, there wasn't too much there. There was Riddle's gasoline station up there, and then we've gone on out there to the, and then on the other side, going up was a railroad, was a gasoline station, and then there was another. Ruffner's had a gasoline station there, and then going on up there was clear to the end of town. There you'll find that's where the tomato factory and the sauerkraut factory was.
And there was a ball field there as well.
Pardon?
Was there always a ball field there, or did they build
Oh
that
yes,
later?
there was always a ball field there. Yes.
How far up was the tomato and sauerkraut factory? Up past the church?
Where the church
Oh yes.
sits?
Let's see. There's a house sits up there by itself.
Where Keeler's had a garage.
Oh, okay.
That was
Yes,
the
yeah,
sauerkraut.
yes.
That was.
Was that really?
Oh
Yeah.
yes, that was where it was.
Yeah.
Oh, you could smell it and buy it. It was delicious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Then let's see, going on up Ligonier Street, then there was there was a area there, and all I can remember being there was Snodgrass. It was a justice of the peace.
Okay. When I was a kid, he was up above the post office.
Okay, well he was
Or up
there.
above where
What was his
Horrell's
first
Tea Room. Joe.
What was his first name?
Joe Snodgrass.
Joe Snodgrass.
And
Yes.
he had.
And he lost his arms on the railroad.
Yeah.
You know,
When he
the
broke
kids
with the
played
train.
on that railroad. Well, the Kirshner kid that was lived over here, he was killed on
That
it.
was my cousin.
Yes, right. And then the other side of the Catholic Church here, those were the Pershings, and that, by the way, that General George Pershing in the First World War, he was their relative,
Right.
and they had a son too that was killed on the railroad.
Oh, really?
Yes. Now let's see, where are we? We're
13th Street.
we're at
13th going
13th going north.
up
right?
the hill, right?
Yes, okay. Let's see, then we had Hare's Meat Market, and then there was a Stiles had a lady had just a home there next, and she did alterations and she made clothes. In fact, I did some of her clothing. It was a style to have people make your clothes.
What was there where the 3 steps were? Right next to the gas station, where Roger Sheriff has a little storage building. There were 3 steps there.
Oh, that's where Joe Snodgrass was when I was growing up.
Okay, because then there was the meat market was next door, then
Yeah,
the alley.
it was separated. Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And there may have been 2 sections in that area where Joe Snodgrass was. I'm not sure. It seems to me there was a
Maybe.
section next to the gasoline station or something, and then there was the Joe Snodgrass.
Yeah, I think you're right because I don't remember the building. I just remember the steps.
Yes, yes.
And they were there. They're still there. I think
Uh-huh.
most of it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's see. Somebody stole my bicycle, and I raced up to tell Joe.
Did you get it back?
No.
Oh.
Anyway. Let's see. Then we get beyond the. And then next to that was George McDowell's hardware. I told you
Cabinet,
about that
yeah.
before.
Right.
And then going on up, there weren't too many as far as Ligonier Street. Let's see, that would be 15th Street. Let's see what I had. I don't think there's anything more going up 15th Street that was in.
No, not really. There was a pool.
Other than people lived there,
Yeah.
but nothing that
Right.
to do with us. No, here it is, yes. And then going on up Ligonier Street, then let's see, that would be between 15th, I think, and about 17th. There were 2 doctors lived. Well, they're not there at one time. One was a Dr. Dio, and the other was a Dr. Taloshko. They lived in the house where Peg Boyle lived on, who's living there now. But,
I'm not sure who was there now.
no,
Yeah,
but that was the house where they were. And then going on up Ligonier Street, then of course we came to Furnace Lane, and then of course that went out to the furnace. And that's the part that we don't really realize just how important those furnaces were and how they made that iron, and
Right.
it's just interesting. And how they led, they developed roads and people lived around them.
Yeah.
Right. Then starting down the other side of the street, let's see, on Ligonier Street, well, it wasn't too much down that way. Let's see what we have here. The Brethren Church
Church
is
of
probably the
Brethren,
next
right.
important thing. And then we went on down to 15th Street, in that area, that block where there was that red brick house was the doctor's offices, and that was where
okay.
Dr. Tittle was, and he was a doctor for years and years. Well, he brought me. He was
And
the
Dr.
doctor when I
Mike was
born.
there for a while.
Pardon?
Dr. Mike was in there for
Yes,
a real short
and
time.
then there was Dr. Shoop was in there too for a while.
Okay, and then there was
Yes.
a dentist, and,
Right.
and Dix lived in there. Norma
right.
Gloria Dick.
Oh,
Oh,
Gloria.
sure.
Yeah.
And then of course we got to the store area there, and that first store had many different occupants. That was where there was a millinery. That's where Mrs. I forgot about the Wagners over here. I forgot to talk about them way back here. But that where Mrs. Graham, Sue Graham, she wasn't Mrs., it was Sue Graham lived. Then she was a millinery, and she had the little millinery shop in that first part of the Dairy Nook building, the upper section.
Okay, yeah.
And then, of course, there was a bake shop in there, and there was a beauty shop in there at one time. Then, of course, we came to Dairy Nook, and that's where most of the kids, we spent most of our time socializing.
So it was called the Dairy Nook back as long as you can remember.
Oh, yeah, as long as I know. It was
Alberta's Dairy Nook, or
well, they were
yeah.
the ones who actually founded it.
Right.
But the Alberta name, it disappeared.
Yeah.
It just became
The Dairy
Dairy
Nook.
Nook. Right. And then that house that's in there between them and the brick building below there, at one time there was a beauty shop in there. And then we get down to where there was a drugstore, and that, of course, was Wagner's
Sinclair's.
Sinclair's
Right.
drugstore, right? And
Bacon BC's. That's all I remember.
Okay, well.
Well, Russ Sinclair, right?
Russ Sinclair
Right,
had it, yes.
right.
And we liked to go there for our Cokes because they made them with the syrup and they were much better than. So we'd go up and spend some time at the Dairy Nook and then we'd run down and get a Coke at the drugstore. And then another funny one was let's see, she was a Skiles, Wid Skiles worked in there for years. And you could buy loose ice cream. That meant it was packed for you while you were standing there. They had it in big bins or tubs. And then, of course, it was only to come to the top. But Viv would take and fill it up for you. But she looked around to see whether Russ was looking before she did that. And she'd say, "Is he around?" She'd fill it up.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, she had a dry sense of humor. But she had some problems before she died.
Now, what was upstairs above that?
Oh, people just lived up there.
Okay, because I remember John Cradle had an office.
Oh,
Attorney
that's
Cradle,
yes, that's right. That's
when
right.
I was young.
Young, that's right. But when I was there were just apartments. In fact, that's where the Sinclairs lived before they
Okay.
built their house over there
Okay.
across the street, or kind of cornered up there.
Okay.
Yes, that's where they lived. And then down just beyond that were the Smiths. About halfway through that building, the Smiths took over.
Okay.
And they lived in it was actually a down to the ground affair. And then there was a building right there, a store building there.
Mm-hmm.
And the Smiths had stole shoes and clothing, things of that sort.
That
And
became
then,
the Ronaldos.
and then, of course, they at one time there was a bake shop in there, all that. And then, of course, down on 13th Street, the big thing, of course, was always the Christmas tree. And then down where the ambulance is now, that area there was a bake shop down in there one
Well,
time.
the
Critters,
Decker-
it was called.
Right,
It
the
was
Deckers
it was
were-
a family affair.
Logan Decker's dad, or
Mm-hmm.
he and his the brothers had it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how long it stayed open. It was always just a garage, but I guess it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And then, of course, the authorities to the railroad lived in the house across there. Then we come to the bank building, and that, of course, was the big hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we had the American store, and then we had the American Legion had the other affair. And before that, DeWitt's had a meat market in there. And then there were two other little buildings in there. One was a shoe store, shoe repair, and the other one was a barber shop.
Fort Tosh. Had a
Yes,
barber shop.
Tosh's had the barber shop. And then we came to DeWitt's. It was the first DeWitt's restaurant, and then it became
Peck's.
Peck's, yes.
Garing's Dairy Mart.
Yeah, Garing's Dairy Nook, right. And I always remember the time that he came rushing down the street, down the subway. And I was coming up the other way, and it was a big truck coming through the subway. And he got down there where the railing was. He says, "Okay," just yelled, "Okay, okay." And what he was doing was, he said, I watched it when trucks came down through that they could get through.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I would run out, and he said, I ran out to tell him that it was safe.
You'll fit.
He wasn't going to get stuck. And by the way, the subway, it originally wasn't there.
Right.
They walked
Great.
over the tracks because that was a story told about the Wagner boy, Ralph and Big Wagner's son, Fred, that she was taking him across the railroad tracks in a buggy, and he jumped out, and he hit his head on the tracks. So they said that was what was wrong with him. I don't know.
Well,
But anyway, that's it. Now, is there anything else that got you back town?
got you back home, I think.
That's right, I'm taking back
Yeah.
home.
Yep.
That was amazing.
Yeah, that was. There's so many little pieces that I know about, but man, there's a whole bunch of pieces that I didn't have any idea about.
Yeah, just interesting. There are probably things I know about I've forgotten too.
Well, if you jot them down, and we can go do part two.
Yeah, right. So I think I know of everything that's written down here.
Okay. Do you have any like photos or any like family photos or anything you'd want to share or anything?
No, we're not I don't take pictures.
Okay.
And they never did either. Couldn't be bothered.
Can I ask a couple of my questions then?
Oh, sure.
So you talked about a bunch about school and everything. Who were your favorite teachers whenever you went?
Mary Elliott was one.
Mary Elliott.
Jim Highsong was one. Agnes Kohler.
What was her last name?
Kohler. Koehler. He was a Presbyterian minister. Her father was a Presbyterian minister.
Huh.
Those are all high school teachers.
Okay.
I don't think I left anybody out. Those are the ones that come to mind that I remember.
You never had Mrs. Chisnell, though.
No.
Okay.
No.
Everybody in my family.
But
Had
I've
Mrs.
I've
Chisnell.
heard my brother and my
Right.
sister talk about
She
Mrs.
was a
Chisnell.
legend. Yeah, she was. Okay.
Well, Mary Elliott would have been the legend when I was.
Josephine and Mary. Yeah.
That's Josephine's sister.
Yeah, I remember. They saw.
I'll tell you, she put the science through. I tell you, I took college chemistry. The first, I just could sit back and relax.
Huh.
I had that much of a background.
Wow.
Well, she left here and went to Pitt in Johnstown, so you know that she had something to offer.
One of the funniest stories I heard about my aunts is, my father was a very long offshoot. There was 13 years between him and my Aunt Jenny Slick,
yes.
right? So he was just a little one, just running around and everything. And it was nearing the end of the time that my aunts had taught in the schools. And in fact, he was supposed to start at the furnace school, where Violet Hall was the teacher. But my grandmother, who wasn't a Hall, she was married to the Hall, right? She didn't like Violet at all. Because she smacked people with the ruler and stuff like that. So she held my dad back for I think it was a year and a half until she retired. So my dad did not go to school for his first year and a half just because his mom didn't like his aunt-in-law or whatever.
Wow.
Okay, so you said about Harvey McClung. Do you remember when George Davis or Bob and Jim Hall died? Do you remember? Just trying to get an idea about like what it was like, whenever the word got back here that that the boys from New Florence were killed.
Isn't that funny? I don't.
Well, what about for Harvey?
I was in college then. So
okay.
So that would be the reason.
Okay.
Well, Harvey went to my church, so
you remember
that's
that
the reason.
better. Yeah.
Right.
And he was it his brother that married Margaret McClung? That's what it was. Okay.
John was his name.
Different people have tried to tell
They
me who
lived
Harvey
up,
was.
up there, Main.
Yeah, I used to cut Margaret's grass.
Yes, sure.
Do you remember? And these aren't necessarily New Florence questions, but do you remember Pearl Harbor?
Oh, sure.
And what your feelings were whenever all that occurred?
Oh, gosh. Let's see, where was I? Oh, I was here at home, sure. Oh, I remember. My goodness sakes, my family would listen. We missed it altogether. I never found out about it till the next day.
Oh, wow.
I went to school, and that's when I found out.
Huh.
Because it was Sunday, and we didn't listen to the radio on Sunday.
That was the radio back there?
That's radio back
Okay.
there, right. It still plays.
Does it really?
Yeah.
Outstanding.
What it replaced was a phonograph.
Control.
Yeah.
Neat.
You know what? I think you covered every other one of my questions on here.
Oh, do you remember up on 15th Street, like behind, going up that alley there? Do you remember the skating rink?
Oh yes, I remember. It was gone when It was just an old building when I grew up.
Because
Yeah, it was
I remember hearing about it, but nobody has ever been able to show a picture or anything. But they said it was huge and it burned to the ground.
Oh yes.
That it was a roller skating rink.
Yeah. Oh yes. It wasn't in use when I was a kid.
Okay, so it's older.
It's older than I am.
Well, that doesn't mean that's not.
No, but that.
So did your grandparents?
Yes.
Ephraim Wallace and then John Maven,
sure.
John Milliken Maven. Did they both live over in West Wheatfield Township? Okay.
Yes, and the Wallaces came. They were poor sheep farmers over in Scotland, and one of the King of England had converted to Protestantism, and they were Protestant, and so he paid them to go to Ireland to convert the Irish to Protestantism.
Right.
And then the next king came along, no, so they weren't paid anymore. So that's when they came to this country, and that was it's been in the 1700s because my great grandfather fought in the Revolution, and he's buried out here in West Fairfield's United Presbyterian Cemetery.
Yep.
That's the one that's behind the oh shucks, what's that? Where Camp Fairfield was.
Oh,
I can't think of it.
Antioch Village.
Yes,
Antioch
Antioch
Village,
It's
okay.
down that road, there's a cemetery. You turn the corner, there's one.
Yeah,
I
it's
have,
not Fort-
I have
To
some
the
of my
left.
great-grandparents. Great-great-grandparents.
yeah,
are
it's
buried
not
there.
Fort
Right.
Palmer. It's
No, it's the other one. It's
the other
they
one.
call it. I think they call it just the Boys Club Cemetery. Mike Caldwell has them all named
Yeah.
Well,
different
it's
things.
the, it's the United Presbyterian Cemetery
Yeah.
is what it is. The
Yeah.
Fort Palmer United Presbyterian Cemetery
Oh.
is what its name is. What it originally was.
Yeah, and then they expanded Fort Palmer. But
And
that's
then,
the original, I think.
Yeah.
And then they
But all your grandparents are buried on right next to my house. Actually, the house I grew up on in
I
Clyde,
see.
out of Bethel.
oh sure
Yeah.
yes all the rest of them are. Oh yes.
I'll be mowing that myself here. Very
Would you like to
soon.
have a cup of coffee and I have some gob cake.
I
I'm
would love
actually
to,
really
but
good. I stopped at the restaurant
You
before I
sure?
came in.
I'm sure.
Because I'd be glad to feed you.
No, I really appreciate the time, and
Oh, yeah.
I
It's kind of interesting to think about it. You don't think about it every day. No, horse.
It is, and I just made mental notes of things that I have heard about, or I've heard my relatives, or just heard stories like we talked before. I know an awful lot about town. I know an awful lot about people here,
Sure.
but I don't know if it's factual or just the way if I created a memory or if
Well,
it's.
see, that's it. I hope there's nothing here. I won't hurt anybody's
Well,
feelings.
I've
you know,
heard-
that's-
I've heard-
there. You didn't say
If you
it.
hear it the same way twice, it's true, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
so
what they
yeah,
say.
yeah,
But
but yeah.
to me, it's kind of interesting.
Thank you very much for
Yes,
It's
pointing-
fascinating to me that.
Yeah, you've seen this book.
Yes, I have. I have.
You have a copy.
Oh yes, my mother every time something came out down here, she
What
got.
about this? The pictures of the past. You
Yep,
have one
I
of
have
those.
that one too. Yep.
Then I have Bolivar's.
I do not have that, but I know we have access to. I know
I have
Debbie's.
it, yeah.
But it's a nice one.
Yeah.
This is what they did with it. If we could find some pictures. But I can't help you. I don't have them.
All right.
But this is. I haven't taken time to really look at it. I looked at it when I bought it, but I don't remember. But some,
Very
Huh.
nice.
and then this is the part that the ads I think we need to think about.
Oh yeah, what was
Yes.
there and what's not there now? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, but this would be for money for us to use.
Oh, okay.
For the other part, yeah, we're both on the team that we wanted to keep the two separate. That's why you weren't there at the last one. I made a point of moving our meeting to its own night
Okay.
to keep
Oh
the
yes, I
things
think
separated.
so. Right.
And I also think that we need to kind of push Debbie along and into getting committees and stuff started
Yes, I
because
do
we're
too. I think that's what's necessary.
yeah. We sat
I mean,
we basically spent an hour and a half, almost 2 hours in a meeting,
Nothing but ideas.
and we decided that we were going to buy 200 stickers and 200 bracelets. That was what more or
That's
less
how
came
much
out
we
of it. And
accomplished.
we're not going to have a very good sesquicentennial if
We
that
gotta get-
continues.
Got
You want me to push
advertisements out
push
so
the button?
people can.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, I don't.